should have passed those cars. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Cook County Board of Commissioners regular meeting today, Tuesday, May 23rd. And if we'd stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So as we get started this morning, are there any adjustments to our agenda?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
If I could just note, we did add, we had to add late one item to the consent agenda, that is the appointment of Bill Hansen to the HRA Board. Wanted to make sure that all the commissioners saw that. And then we deleted an item later in the agenda because it needs to go before the Budget and Facilities Advisory Committee before it comes here.
All right, thank you. So is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Mills. Is there support?
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Hawkins. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, we have our public comment period. This is an opportunity for citizens to appear before the county board. Are there any citizens that wish to speak this morning? Did any commissioners or Administrator Yorkie get any public comments to read?
No, ma'am.
All right, we'll move on to item 3, our consent agenda. So we have a number of items there. Is there any item a commissioner wishes to pull? Commissioner Storley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just acknowledgement and welcoming Bill Hansen to the HRA Board. It's good that he's willing to serve on that, and then with regrets that Lori Erickson will have to be leaving. We'll miss her for sure.
Absolutely. So is there a motion to approve our consent agenda?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Mills. Is there support?
I'll support that.
Thank you, Commissioner White. We have a motion and support for our consent agenda. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We are now on to item 4, which is our 2023 MCIT report. And we really appreciate the fact that we have an opportunity to get an in-person presentation this morning, and that you've given us some really nice information electronically as well as in print. So thank you so much for coming this morning.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Thank you so much for the time on your agenda here this morning. I greatly appreciate it. My name is Tom Supis. I am your MCIT Risk Management Consultant, and I certainly have enjoyed working with Cook County really for, well, since 2017 when I started. So, well, appreciate this. This is our opportunity to talk about our MCIT report to the Commissioners. Typically, we provide this report every other year. Our last one was in 2019. We canceled 2021, unfortunately. So it's been 4 years since we've been here. So with that, a few welcome, I guess, we missed a few elections in there. So welcome Commissioner Hawkins, Commissioner and Board Chair Sullivan from 2021, and also Commissioner White from 2023. So welcome. Well, respecting your time, I'm just going to touch on really a few of the highlights here of our report. And as you may already know, now MCIT, we're a joint powers public entity risk sharing pool. We're not an insurance company. We were built by counties for counties, and really for all the counties affiliated entities as well. So just a little history. Back in the late 1970s is when I think our counties were finding that workers' compensation coverage was becoming very difficult to find, especially for law enforcement. And it was, if you did find it, it was very expensive. So a few of our counties decided to pool their funds, decided to pay the work comp coverage themselves. And it worked, in fact, very, very well. So in 1979 is when MCIT was formed. Shortly thereafter, that went so well that in really 1980 to early 81, we added the property, the casualty, which is the liability coverage, and then the auto coverage as well. And really, Cook County has been with MCIT now since 1981. And so we thank you very much for that. So we're really part of the original group. Now, we cover really 81 of the 87 counties in Minnesota, really all but the 6 large self-insured counties. Hennepin and Ramsey County, Anoka and Dakota, St. Louis County, and Olmsted County are the 6 counties that are not in the trust. So we have all the other counties as well as over 390 of your affiliated entities, your historical societies, soil and water conservation districts, agricultural societies, joint powers groups, lake improvement districts. So really all public entities are with MCIT. So we're really all kind of on the same team, if you will. So now I guess we're really celebrating over 44 years of managing risks together. And we mean together too, because again, we appreciate all the interaction and the response from our counties. We feel that really our success is kind of built on, our willingness to adjust our coverage to really meet your service needs. And so we're always looking to try to improve and provide additional coverage. But we appreciate our members and our county's willingness to really support our loss control and our risk management efforts, as well as our MCIT programs and services. Kind of comes back to our mission, providing Minnesota counties and associated members cost-effective coverage with comprehensive and quality risk management services. So with that, we can turn to the second page. I'm just going to touch on the cyber coverage a little bit. That was a change from 2022. About mid-year, we found out that our carrier, Hartford Steam Boiler, actually provided a fair amount of cyber coverage in the cyber world. They decided they were not going to renew MCIT for 2023, not because of our claim experience. It was primarily really due, they were just backing out of cyber coverage for many, many of their insureds. So we had to go out to look for another carrier. And our staff, we found one. Actually, our liability reinsurer, Counties Reinsurance Limited, actually now provides our reinsurance coverage for our cyber. And MCIT is actually handling those cyber claims now in-house, I guess, with the work of a variety of experts that we have on board. Data practices attorneys, we have data, again, forensic IT folks. So these are all kind of at your beck and call. So again, I think a successful change and switch over on our cyber coverage. It's actually additional coverage. So it's a $500,000 limit. I know Cook County has had additional coverage. However, that $500,000 actually has some better coverage within it. It actually has some per claim coverage, so it's actually a little better coverage. So I think at this point we're very pleased. We'll see what 2024 holds for cyber coverage. Again, that's an emerging risk. We'll talk about cyber a couple of times here, and again, just to try to build resistance. But again, so our coverage, we'll see if there are additional limits available in 2024 or what that might look like. So stay tuned for more updates on the cyber. Moving on to the dividend, I guess we all like to talk about the dividends, they're kind of fun. Again, the 2022 dividend really was the workers' compensation division only. So this is reviewed actuarially. And again, it's important. Dividends actually look to the past. They actually reflect on past claim experience as well as our MCIT investments. Now, we can only invest as you folks can. So it's based upon that claim experience. Work comp went very well. So again, returned actuarially a $7 million dividend, and you see the Cook County's dividend was $62,696. So that's on the work comp. This was the first year we didn't have a property casualty dividend. And so again, actuarially, no reason to be concerned. Everything is funded. However, there were some claim experience kind of on the jail liability, law enforcement liability that kind of lended. The recommendation was not to return a property casualty dividend for 2022. So hopefully that was the first year that has happened. So again, it is jail liability that has been an issue. So that claim experience. So again, as written, it only says, again, we can only issue a dividend when it's actuarially sound and fiscally prudent. Okay? Moving on to the rates, kind of the blue box on that page. Now, rates are actuarially derived as well. Now, rates actually look forward. They'll actually look at all of our members' exposures for the coming year, as well as MCIT's operating costs, to determine what those coverage, what those rates will be for next year. Now, we only try to really, collect what's necessary to cover those costs. So with that, hopefully, again, in a risk-sharing pool, that similarity of exposures with our counties, as well as, again, the economies of scale can hopefully kind of build in some rate stability, and that's what we're finding kind of over the years. And it allows our members to budget, for coverage costs for next year. We get that out to you by August. Moving on to the third page here. So the aggregate work comp claims, top 3 by department. Now this is MCIT as a whole. This is not just Cook County. Looking at the years of 2018 to 2022, looking at frequency, the number of claims, as well as severity, the cost of those claims. Now, again, sheriff and jail operations have really led in both frequency and severity for some time, followed by highway, as well as hospital and nursing home. Now, again, those are not too surprising. Those departments really are 24/7 operations. And some of those, again, some of that work can be hazardous. So those were the frequency and severity in the work comp. Looking on the right-hand column here, it talks about workers' compensation claims and how they can affect the county's work comp contribution. Again, this is referencing the workers' compensation experience mod, or experience modification factor, if you will. So that really is actually experience rated, so on the frequency of claims as well as the severity of claims. Where a 1.0 is about a neutral or a base cost, if you will. Over 1.0 would be paying a little extra over that base cost. Under 1.0 would be less than that base cost. Now, there's an expected claim activity by classification code and the payroll in each one of those codes. So that's kind of how it's a complex equation. But bottom line is, you look at again, Cook County's experience mod for 2023 is a 0.83. Congratulations. I mean, that takes the county-wide. And I know Cook County, again, you guys are phenomenal, but really, again, that's a county-wide effort. And you can look at, that experience mod has been going down here now recently, so we applaud those efforts, applaud the ongoing efforts of, again, working with the safety committee, a strong return to work program. So again, all employees, as they heal, they can continue to contribute. So again, it's a great way, and it saves the county, actually, then as listed here, $18,890. So again, driving those experience money, it keeps your people working and keep them doing what they do well, but also and saves the county some dollars as well. So we congratulate that. Continue to work with Nick Lindberg. Nick Lindberg is your loss control consultant that works with, and I know Nick has been with he loves this county too, been with him since 2016, so we greatly appreciate that. So moving to the aggregate property casualty claims, the top 3. So now again, same years, 2018 to 2022, so this is the center of the page. Again, frequency and severity, it's auto. Auto has led really in frequency and severity for quite some time. That's why we try to have a lot of loss control services around auto. We want every auto to get through their day, and certainly everybody in that auto. So again, we're trying to offer, again, more defensive driving. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But again, to try to reduce some of those incidents. Followed by property. Again, the storm claims were pretty rough these last couple of years. So again, they just kind of keep coming. As well, followed by general liability on the frequency side. Those are from the slip, trip, falls to whatever on general liability claims. And then on the severity is the law enforcement and jail liability claims. All right, moving to the, yes, please.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Madam
Thank you,
Chair,
Tom.
Commissioner Miller.
And so this is aggregate, the property. This is for all of MCIT.
All of
Yep.
MCIT, that is correct. Yep.
Thank you.
Please.
Commissioner.
Do you have
Commissioner White.
numbers that you could share with us for Cook County, perhaps? I mean, specifically, I know you have them somewhere.
Not with our report, I guess we really don't. But again, if those questions, Nick is incredible at running, queries. And so Nick would be able to provide some of that information as well, okay?
Yeah.
So I would encourage, I think Nick was just meeting online, with Jonna yesterday, so be able to create some of that information for you, okay? All right, moving on. Let's go to the last page. So just some of the services that MCIT provides. Again, mentioned the consultation. So with Nick Lindberg and myself, we just love working with Cook County. Again, folks reach out. We hear from a number of different departments, and again, we just greatly appreciate that opportunity. So again, we are really at your beck and call, and if we don't have the information, we'll usually can find somebody who does. And so again, we appreciate the opportunity to work with Cook County. Training mentions, again, we do a variety of in-person trainings as well as virtual trainings. We're doing hybrid trainings. We're trying to record a lot of those trainings and put those out on our website at mcit.org. So that's really available. And any other information, again, any requests for training, we try to be available. Our coverage reviews, we record all of those, explain a little bit more deeper into our coverage. Providing programs on risk management and workers' compensation. Minnesota Government Data Practices Act is a popular program. We offer that quite often, actually. Building a positive safety culture, which again is I would again applaud Cook County for again their efforts. Navigating land use decisions is a very popular one with our commissioners. We also just recently had a cyber security program for our county attorneys that was pretty well attended as well at MCIT. The awareness and prevention materials up in the corner of the page, and we're proud to say a number of those are award-winning. We try to have good-looking, again, publications, solid information, factual. So we try to provide again those resources. A few of the ones that are pictured here, The Essentials of Data Security for Public Entities. It's a wonderful book that really has a lot of chapters, again, about building resistance, rebuilding protections for the county. Again, we're looking at coverage, but really trying to build the emphasis really on the structure and really reminding us all that we're kind of the weakest link as far as clicking on some of the wrong things and allowing viruses into our systems. So it's just a good reminder, and that these bad actors out there are busy, and they are really targeting public entities. They're targeting school districts, they're targeting counties and smaller cities. And so again, just trying to mine for data, and so we need protections, with systems in place as well. So that's a great program, and again, there's a lot of different chapters. You can download that on our website as well. The cybersecurity self-assessment checklist. Again, it's just another way to really examine where some of the strengths are, where some of the vulnerabilities may be, and again, you can consider budgetary considerations as far as what else you can do to try to build protections for the county. So both of those, all of those, as well as other documents, again, things that the county can do to really provide some of the best practices around cybersecurity. The service providers, one is the Employee Assistance Program with Sand Creek, again, professional counseling. I'm going to come back to that program. The Minnesota Safety Council. So all members of MCIT are also members of the Minnesota Safety Council. And again, Cook County has, worked with the Safety Council. One of the programs they have is a defensive driving program. Either a 20-minute online, just a good refresher for us all to keep our skills sharp, as well as a 2-hour, really in-person taught by an ex-trooper. Again, that's another great program. All of these are included. So I encourage you to reach out, again, on some of these programs. Hartford Steam Boiler, they actually are a boiler carrier. And so they provide the boiler and pressure vessel inspections for the counties. Again, that is all included as well. Try to make sure there's no catastrophic loss in some of that equipment. And then back to our Employee Assistance Program with Sand Creek. Again, that's a professional counseling program that's available to all employees, all elected officials, and your dependents as well. Because again, oftentimes our dependents can make a difference in where our thoughts and distractions are. And so I gotta say, Cook County is probably the example of really, really employing and sharing that employee assistance program. Your percentage of use is wonderful. Again, it's over 15% up to 19%. That is exceptional. That means you're actually getting a lot of that information out there, that people are using that service. Again, it's voluntary, it's confidential, and it's included. And that is 6 sessions per issue, not per year, per issue. And these last couple of years have been rough. Life can pile up on us. And again, reaching out early is a good risk management risk. Again, to try to reduce some of those, intervene early, get help early. And so again, we applaud Cook County for what you folks do. So keep up the great work there. I saw just some of the brochures and stuff that we have around. So again, great job promoting that program, and it works. And it's also local too, so we try to provide a lot of those services here local. There's a few other programs. One is for elected officials. Not saying your job is ever stressful, right? So, but if it can, again, just there's a program there to help elected officials. There's one for law enforcement. Again, critical incident, trying to help all law enforcement, again, really process what all happens in their lives. And then lastly, there's actually a coaching program as well, and that is unlimited. You can reach out to Sand Creek. Again, it's great for team building within the organization. It's great if there's any conflict that really needs to help resolve. So they're at your beck and call as well. So again, we applaud those efforts. And then lastly, what the commissioners can do, and again, we just thank you for all that you do. And thank you for supporting, again, the safety efforts and the loss control and the risk management efforts. As Nick was saying, there's been a commissioner on the safety committee since 2016. That's unique. It really is, to have that kind of support and effort from throughout the organization. Again, standing ovation here again. So great job there. One thing I'll just mention is, using your knowledge of MCIT, coverage to, influence your decisions, and then reach out to us if you have any, and you do that. What's covered, what's not covered, how would MCIT coverage apply or not apply? So again, we applaud those efforts. Let me bring that back to cyber as well. Now, one thing again with cyber, if anything were to happen, something's not right, system's not working right, I'm not sure if we were hacked or not, file a claim. Remember, we're there to help. We're a risk-sharing pool. We bring these experts on board to help folks look. So again, it's important, get MCIT involved in the onset. So hopefully that will really kind of create a better outcome really for the county as well. I know you have great staff that will figure these things out, but get MCIT, get the experts on board to help. They're ready, they're available for you. Others, again, just supporting the safety committee, the return to work program, encouraging training and participating yourselves, and just engaging MCIT as often as you can, kind of like we're doing today. So again, thank you so much. So with that, on behalf of the MCIT Board of Directors, all of our MCIT service team, we greatly thank you again for this opportunity to be with you, but also your ongoing support and participation in the success of our MCIT program. So we thank you. So that's our report for this year, so I'm available for any questions you might have.
Do any commissioners have questions? Commissioner White.
You said MCIT has been here since 1981?
1979 is when it started. Cook County actually started with MCIT in 1981. So 79 was when we had that pilot study to look at work comp. And then really about 1980 to 1981 is when the property, liability, and auto was added.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
When you were on page 2, you made a comment that Cook County has additional cyber coverage. Did I hear that correctly?
That was our previous carrier. That was the previous carrier. But again, I think Cook County actually had $1 million of coverage then. But that was a limited coverage within that $1 million umbrella. So now, again, all counties have a $500,000 limit with built-in, sub-limits, but also some per-claim coverage. So the overall, the per aggregate is a policy year. How much is totally covered? And again, so there is additional coverage within that. And again, so in actually that book that I mentioned, that Essentials of Data Security for Public Entities, In Chapter 1, in that book, is a great detail about our cyber coverage and how that coverage works and how those limits apply. So I would encourage you again to look at that document. Okay?
Is that a book that you supply or can be gotten through MC?
You can get it online.
You can get it,
Online
yeah,
for
Madam Chair.
our-
Yeah, you can get that
and-
online. You can download it by chapter, so you can really download that chapter. It tells you really a great deal about our information, as well as all the other information in there as well. Okay?
Yeah.
Commissioner Storley.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. This really is very colorful and more readable than what we got in our agenda, so thank you.
Well, thanks.
Sorry, James.
I will let our communications folks know.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great, a good-looking document, thanks.
I represent Cook County at the MCIT meetings. So maybe hopefully before December, when we have our annual meeting, we'll have more update. But we have a great IT department. One of our representatives is right here, and two of them right there. So we're constantly being updated and reminded of what we need to and not do
Right.
on our county computer.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah.
Commissioner White.
Might I ask our wonderful MIT people, and it's being pointed to the one on the outside, have you taken advantage of these different trainings that's offered through the Minnesota Counties Intergovernmental Trust?
Personally, no, I haven't. I've double checked with our staff if they've done it, but not to my knowledge, no. That's a great resource. That we should
Okay.
definitely-
And then you're now aware that I don't even know, have we ever had any scary moments with cyber breaches inside with this county?
We've had some scary moments. We've never filed a claim. So
Okay.
We've had issues at the local PC level that have never impacted the infrastructure, the system, the network.
Okay, and so supposedly, they have people that maybe know more than you do that could help you if you needed help if we get, so he says, what can I say? So anyway, it's a great resource if it's true. I don't trust anyone, so anyway, I understand, so you understand, and because I just know how the MIT department just seems pretty knowledgeable here because of how they're continuingly updating us about things that we had never even considered, so thank you for offering more assistance,
Thank you.
is the case.
Commissioner Mills.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that those close calls that we have, the reason they didn't go bigger was because of
I know.
the work
Yes,
that's being
I'm
done.
aware.
We used to get tests in our emails, and I don't know if we still do.
We'll be starting that again.
Yeah, that sure kept me on my toes, and generally my habits are pretty good, I'll just say that. But I did get caught once with one of those tests, and I was just like, okay, it's on. So I think that was a good move. And then also, just educating staff. The staff is the weakest link, so clicking on something we shouldn't be, and that's really the training that we need. And so there are resources to help train us all on how to not click on things. There's also a game I've been recently made aware of called Is This Spam? And spam isn't the right word for it because, the malware and the phishing is, but spam is what people, call it. And so the, people who ever have any question just forward the email to MIS and say, is this spam? And it's, I think it's a really good game versus clicking, right?
And I just want to thank you on behalf of the county. I sit on the safety committee and have had a chance to work with Nick. We meet on a monthly basis. We go all through the claims, if any have been filed, talk about what we can do to improve, how we can communicate and create safer conditions for our employees. We're very good about data privacy. There's never any names mentioned, but we do reflect upon instances and make sure that we're in the mode of continuous improvement. And we couldn't do that without Nick and without the services of MCIT. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, They are very responsive, and we call them, email them a lot, actually, and there's no sense of we're overburdening them. They're very happy to get the
Absolutely.
Call.
Anytime, please.
even if it's redundant, I've noticed, but, I just wanted to mention on, on safety issues, just looking at our history, our work comp for this year is about 92,000, it was about 104 last year, just to give you context. But we've been as high as 161,000 in 2006. And think of the, how the costs have changed since then. But that was due to, unfortunate accidents, et cetera, that happened in the past. So just it gives you an example of, this is real world, safety and money going together. But
Precisely.
Well, thanks. Thank you, Brady. One thing I didn't mention, again, you mentioned some of those different years. Now, how that workers' compensation mod works, I didn't mention the 3 years, so 2019, 2020, and 2021 would make up that 2023 mod. So the most recent year is not included because those are still developing. So 2019, 2020, and 2019, 20, and 21 make up 23's mod. So again, some of those previous claims then would drop off, and then a new year would come on. So that's kind of how that workers' compensation works. So thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Hawkins?
Yes, thank you for being here. I'm wondering about our coverage as a county. You mentioned Historical Society, Soil and Water. That's under our,
No.
or they have their own?
Yeah, Madam
Insurance
Chair, yeah,
program
Commissioner.
different?
Yeah, they have their own coverage.
Okay.
Yeah, they have their own coverage. They're a separate entity.
Okay.
But again, they have some affiliation with the county. But no, they have their own policy, they have their own coverage, and they have their own experience, so.
And I'm wondering about our YMCA building and coverage there, and was an issue about programming coverage. And do you supply that for our county?
Well, and again, I did respond, the Commissioner was looking at, our coverage, again, really responds to the county. Our coverage does not really cover YMCA. They would likely, hopefully, have their own coverage for their own programming. However, since it's in a county building, that's how the county could be brought in if something were to happen. Was it a building issue? Was it a maintenance of the building issue? Or was it a YMCA supervised provision or programming that actually created the issue? So it is shared. So we would have to work together if something happened. But again, most claims are built on negligence. Did the county either do something they shouldn't have or didn't do something they should have? And with that, created an injury. So, we would then defer, if it was all YMCA, we would defer it to them. But we would always be there to defend the county if something were to happen, if that makes sense.
Commissioner
Yes.
Mills?
That makes great sense, and yeah, you replied to my email very thoroughly, and I appreciate that. And maybe I didn't frame the question or the situation well enough. But the situation is that there was a log rolling program. The YMCA no longer, through their risk assessment, supports that program. And so they pulled out. We as a community are trying to figure out solutions to continue that program. And so we do have a use agreement for the facility, as does the school. The school investigated options and didn't find viable options for coverage if it was a school program, not a Y. So the Y is out, just forget all that.
Sure.
But if the county wanted to somehow help the program outside of the Y, how might or could that work? It's money, right? But
Well, it can be, yeah, Madam Chair, Commissioner Mills. So as I try to mention, typically, again, only if it was a county program. If a county program, MCIT coverage follows the county for all of your programs and operations. So if it was strictly a county program, then we have to look deeper. Again, one thing about, you mentioned log rolling, if there's any racing or stunting or timing kind of things going on, that brings us into an exclusion. So there may be issues there, just covering that particular entity. Because typically, you're not going to be doing that just for fun. Often, there is a bit of a competition to that.
Yes.
And so as a result, I think that, and again, how MCIT with a risk-sharing pool, it's all shared exposures. There's not a lot of that in the county or in any of the counties, you
Right.
know. So anytime there is something that is different, you know, that's where those exclusions are built in to apply. So again, MCIT doesn't really provide that kind of coverage. So as I mentioned, they would likely have to, there's a lot of risk carriers out there that will provide coverage for most anything. And so the coverage is out there. Again, whether or not a club could afford that or not, or find that that's really cost effective to provide that type of program, knowing with those kind of overhead costs. And so, you know, at this point, you know, since the YMCA and the school district are not providing, that sheds a little light on it anyway.
Right.
As well as that, you know, injuries could happen. So if it's happening within a county facility, the county could be brought in, or at least named, and say, you must have had some, you know, responsibility in that. And so we would look to defend and have the county dismissed. But, you know, that could stay in, the county could stay in, and it's really some of those legal costs. So our limits, all of our defense costs are outside, so they're in addition to the limits. And so there's plenty of defense costs, but we'd rather, you know, and the county would probably rather not getting into that. So they'd have to search first to see if they can get a risk carrier to provide that coverage. And then if the county were to decide that you really want to provide this program as a county, you know, program, then we have to look in that further. And I'm concerned, I think an exclusion would likely apply. Okay?
Commissioner Hawkins.
So, some background, our log rolling group did get their own coverage. And now the YMCA says that's not enough coverage. So I would appreciate if you maybe could look into what amount of coverage do we want the log rolling group to provide so that we can allow this program to continue?
Sure. Well, and Madam Chair and Commissioner, I indicated that as well in my email. And really, our recommendation is always to follow the tort cap limits, you know, and that really mirrors our coverage. $500,000 per claimant, meaning if only one person was injured or suffered property damage, that's $500,000 limit. That's the most a public entity would be responsible for. However, the YMCA is not a public entity, you know, so if they're offering that program, again, it's not limited anywhere. So the county to be mirrored into that potentially could expose the county above your tort cap limits of $500 per claimant, 1.5 per occurrence. So 1.5 million would be if more than one person was injured or suffered property damage. Up to that limit is the most the county would be responsible for. Again, that's a public entity. You know, again, you have defenses in the form of immunities as well as tort caps, you know, to protect the public entity. So you do what you do. The YMCA doesn't have those limits. So again, there would be risks there. So, you know, those are our recommendations. They at least have that kind of coverage, and that would be expensive. And like I say, typically the private market doesn't do 1.5 million in occurrence. They do in $1 million increments. So it'd be 1 million or a 2 million per occurrence. And it's important to have a per occurrence to say, is only one person going to be involved? Usually it's unlikely. And so to protect it, we certainly want the per occurrence limit. That's why I mentioned, you know, then get a $1 million general liability policy to cover, again, that bodily injury or property damage, and then get another $1 million umbrella. So that's just, you know, typically umbrella policies are less than trying to get a 2 million per occurrence policy. That would be quite expensive. But again, whichever works. So the 1 million general liability underlying with a 1 million umbrella would provide actually $2 million worth of coverage. And it'd be protecting, you know, the club as well as the county, and then name the county as an additional insured on their policy. So if the county is brought in because of something they did or didn't do, you know, again, we would look there first and see if we can get the coverage, we can get the legal defense. We would certainly monitor it. But again, your coverage with MCIT would be behind that. But again, if the county didn't do anything wrong, why is the county paying? So, some of the options. So I tried to lay out, again, at least some of the things that you may want to consider. And any other questions, go ahead, please reach out to me.
All right, well,
Thank you.
we will do that. I think that's important, and we appreciate you responding to our questions.
Sure, anytime.
Really do. All right.
We appreciate the
Commissioner
opportunity.
Mills.
Changing topics here, if I may. I appreciate you mentioning the EAP program and the successes we've had in our organization. And it's ironic because at the Benefits and Wellness Committee, we feel like our usage is low. And so we're always looking to getting it out there. And we really believe, of course, prevention is the way to go there and to process things as they come up and not let things, build and bottle up and accumulate. And some of the feedback that we've been having from staff is that and I appreciate that it's 6 sessions per issue. However, it's really hard to define where an issue ends and begins, right? Everything's connected.
Everything kind of interconnected, yes.
And so no one on our Benefits and Wellness Committee had used the service, and so I volunteered to dive in and start using it. And I did run into that 6 session limit kind of conflict.
Okay.
And how it was explained to me is that this service is intended as kind of a crisis response or an emergency response versus then an ongoing service. Sure. And I understand that, and therapy can be quite expensive as a regular thing. However, I still believe that there's been quite a lot of trauma ongoing in our community and in the world as a whole. And so if we could have a service that helps deal with that on the regular and more frequently than, six per item, I think it'd be really helpful, and it would really reduce, our longer-term costs. So just a little feedback there, but again, it's a wonderful organization, Sand Creek, and the program, the EAP, is a wonderful program, so I appreciate that. I was also kind of curious just about claims around law enforcement and trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder. Like, that seems like that's on the rise, and just looking at ways how we can try to reduce that risk as well.
Well, thank you. Yeah, Commissioner Mills and Madam Chair. Yeah, I think that's where that law enforcement Sand Creek program is for that critical incident, for law enforcement, try to help them reduce some of those. As far as the 6 visits, again, per issue, that was added in 2020 when COVID hit. Because
Used to be 4, right?
4 sessions, yeah, and that is very typical. And so we've looked at that is more available. And so that's why just adding 2 more, hopefully 6 sessions, enough to build traction enough to at least get over that crisis, like you say.
That helps.
And then from there, a reduction in cost, because typically there is a reduced price going forward. And so I think that's kind of where the program was staying, and hopefully we'll stay at the 6 sessions and not go back to the 4. Because I think, and we've heard enough, that the 6 sessions is enough. And like you say, issues can kind of become intertwined. And is there more, available with the different issue, even though that's very similar. So we kind of have to rely on Sand Creek there. If you have any other questions or whatever, just shoot me an email. I will forward that on to our deputy director, as the one that has the ongoing, communication with Sand Creek. So at least we reviewed some of those. We appreciate that. But yeah, and I think, again, Cook County, some of the percentage of use, and appreciate you at least checking it out, because we'd like to hear, what is it like? And I've reached out personally myself and actually have been pleased, with some of those, results as well. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Comments.
Well, thank you so much, Tom. We really appreciate your time and the fact that you came here in person after a kind of a long period without that. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Okay.
Have a great day.
All right, thanks. Take care.
You bet. All right, at this point, we are going to jump down to item 9. I understand that we are ready for Ellers on the phone.
Shortly.
Good morning, this is Bruce.
Good morning, Bruce. It's James Yorking, Cook County. How are you?
I'm good, James. How about you?
Doing well. We've got you on speakerphone here, and we are ready to talk about the update to the county's financial management plan.
Great. And how can you hear me over there?
We hear you loud and clear.
Okay. James, do you want to give any kind of a lead-in before I just give some comments?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So Brady Powers and I have recently been talking with Bruce about updating our financial management plan. The last time we did this was about 5 years ago. And because we're updating our capital improvement plan, obviously we need to have some strategy for financing investments in deferred maintenance and also potentially in new space. And so we've been talking with Bruce about how we can do that. There are a number of different bonding strategies that we could use depending on what we're going to be doing. And so there are a lot of moving parts currently. Obviously, this board has not approved the CIP, and there's still discussions that we need to have about that. So that is not resolved yet. But in the meantime, we also need to be planning in parallel the update to our financial management plan so that we can have a strategy for making these improvements when the board approves them. So that is kind of my summary. Brady, anything you'd like to add to that before Bruce starts?
No, that's pretty thorough.
Okay. So Bruce, I think then we're ready for your report.
All right, great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, commissioners. I'm actually on my way right now down to Lee Sewer County, excuse me, the other end of the state, but I appreciate having this opportunity to just give you an update on where we're at and what we're doing with a look ahead to, what we intend to provide to you to help you in this decision-making process, as James mentioned. So some of you may recall, or maybe have seen after the fact, the financial management plan that we worked on with the county back in 2018, as James mentioned. And a financial management plan, or FMP, is really a capital improvement plan that also adds projections as to the county's operating budget going forward, at least in the major funds, and the ones that really are affected to the greatest extent or have the greatest impact on the county's tax levy. So we look at, with the CIP, we look at estimated projects, project costs, project timing, and the assumed method of funding, whether that be cash or debt. And then we if it's debt, we run some debt projections, really more as placeholders, not as a definitive, you will be issuing this debt, but more like, okay, it makes sense to, if you're going to do this project, it makes sense to issue debt, and here's how that might look. And then on the operating side, we look to project your revenues and expenses in the different major funds so that when we look at them all together, we have a holistic view of what is likely to change with the county's tax levy and also your your fund balances. Because what we don't want to do is, create a solution for today's projects or in 2023, 2024 that looks good now, but then jams up your ability to move forward with other capital needs and or other operational needs and priorities as well. So this tool is really helpful in making sure that we're covering all the bases, at least the major ones. We don't try to get down to every line item of detail, but then also gives you, as the elected officials, the sense of what is likely to be needed if you choose to move forward with this set of both capital priorities and operating priorities. What's likely to happen then in going forward with your taxes and your fund balances to make sure that you think they are within a range that is both reasonable and prudent on both fronts. There's a few things that will require some fine-tuning as we go and will probably need adjustment, at least on an annual basis. Some of that is your federal aid, and I know that's an ongoing question that hasn't been resolved yet and will probably be, subject to further consideration in the future. But then we also do want to make this a usable tool so that James and Brady and others can keep this updated. We're certainly happy to help, but keep it updated, and as you go through the capital planning process and refine the county's capital plans, you can make those adjustments in the CIP as well. So we really want to make sure that this is a sort of a living model and not just a static report that sits on the shelf. Before I talk a little bit more in detail about this update process, does anyone have any questions about what the FMP is intended to do more broadly?
Any commissioners? No, we don't, Bruce.
All right, thank you. All right, so then looking at this year's process, as James mentioned, he and Brady and I have had a few conversations looking specifically at the large, colorful spreadsheet of deferred maintenance projects over the next 5, 6, 7 years, as well as at the possibility of adding new space for variants and what the possible costs of that kind of a project might be. And what we're doing at Ellers now is really updating the model, really almost building it new again since it has been 5 years, using the county's most recent financial statements for the last 2 to 3 years, as well as your budget here for 2023, and then putting together some fairly high-level projections of what your operating budget might look like in the next 5 to 10 years, knowing that the farther out we go, the murkier our crystal ball gets. But again, we feel it's really important to understand how the county's spending has evolved over the last several years, how you anticipate it going forward, and making sure that whatever else happens, we always maintain an appropriate level of fund balance. Or conversely, if it makes sense to dip into fund balance a little bit, that we have a clear reason for doing that, and that there's a clear path to rebuilding to whatever level you deem appropriate. So we know that fund balance has always been important to Cook County. I'm a big proponent of keeping a high fund balance, especially for smaller counties, because if you do have a need that crops up out of the middle of nowhere, you want to make sure that you have the ability to address it promptly and that you're not in a cash crunch as a result of that. But we're working on that side of things. And then we're also parsing, on the capital side, we're parsing out the projects into a potential funding plan that, again, is really just a set of possibilities. It's not even a recommendation, but it's using our knowledge and our familiarity with how a lot of other counties tackle projects like this to say, okay, here's how you might group some of these priorities. Here's what might make sense to issue bonds for. Let's see if we can pay cash for other projects, and just, prepare that kind of a game plan, if you will, for your consideration next month. And ultimately, again, the bottom line will be looking at the tax rates, the tax impacts, and the fund balances of the county, given that set of assumptions. We do know that you are looking on a couple of different tracks, both with the deferred maintenance projects as well as the new capital, and so we're kind of looking at it sort of like, okay, here's for the next couple of years, and then here is a little bit further out, including or not including a major project along the lines of what you've been discussing and will continue to discuss. So I think this
Bruce, can you hear us?
Probably got in a
We
dead
can't hear
zone.
you. Can you hear us?
Probably dead zones down there.
I would imagine.
We might have to call him back.
Even in the sewer.
Are you there?
We
We
are.
are now, yes. You just dropped out for a little bit there, Bruce. Oh, there he goes. Oh. Just a moment.
It's just like Cook County.
Yeah. So you get a signal, you pull over and talk. That's another 5 yards.
Hi, you've reached Bruce Kimmel. Please leave a message and I'll get back.
He'll call back when he gets in range. That's what I always say.
I'll give him a moment.
Okay.
Have you worked with Ehlers before?
I'll take a
Ehlers
short
before?
pause
Have you
and hope
worked with
that,
county has? Because the school used to all the time. They were good people. They explain things. That was one of the good ones. Jeez.
Hey there, Bruce.
Hi, I'm sorry about that.
That's all right.
So just to conclude my monologue here, I feel good about where we're going with this process. I will say that, the county, through its really strong financial management in past years, has, I think, positioned itself well to consider a larger capital project. You don't have a great deal of property tax debt outstanding. As you know, the lion's share of what you have is paid for very, very, very comfortably with the 1 cent sales tax. And so we'll be looking to reconnect with Brady and James again on, putting together some scenarios and being ready to discuss those with you next month. So why don't I stop there and ask what questions you have or what clarifications I can provide.
questions any commissioners have? Commissioner Mills?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Speaking of the 1%, is that the payoff and everything being factored into this FMP?
Bruce, did you hear the question?
I did, and not directly. We have been monitoring that, and in fact, I just sent James and Brady an email about that yesterday, because we know that you will be in position to pay those bonds off sometime earlier than the final maturity in February of 2033. And depending on how your collections go between, now and over the next 3 to 4 years, you might be able to even do that, sometime still here in the 2020s. I don't want to put too fine of a date on it, but yeah, we are monitoring that, and I expect to work with Brady and Kelly to update our projections on that front. The nice thing is we deliberately kept the repayment schedule from before to make sure that you were never under the gun and never had to contribute other county funds to pay debt service. But we know that you are accumulating a surplus and will be able to redeem those bonds at least several years early, in which case you would be in a position to then, if you and your stakeholders wish to do that, you could then go to the legislature with a request for a new local option sales tax, or really a renewal in your case, but for a new set of projects.
Thank you. Could you speak at all to our options if we did pay it back early or if we didn't? I thought there was something about us being able to use that revenue in put it into the general fund.
No, not really. The debt that was authorized and the tax that was authorized was really for a specific set of projects, all of which you have built and accomplished. And so once you are able to pay off your debt on those bonds remaining, you might remember we refunded those back in 2020, I think. You would be you would be in a position of needing to decertify that sales tax, unless again you were able to get reauthorization for a new one from both the legislature and from the voters.
I thought there was a provision in there that was said differently, but you know what I'm talking about, Brady?
Yeah, I do. I'd have to pull it up.
Okay. Well, I hope you guys can, we don't need to talk about it now,
Yeah.
but I just want to make sure that's incorporated, because it sounded like there was more opportunities there that we could leverage visitor dollars to help our community, so.
Well, I'll definitely look forward to having that conversation. I apologize, I'm not aware of
No, it's all good.
that element, but we'll definitely dig into that.
Cool. Thank you.
Do other commissioners have questions? Well, Bruce, we'll look forward to visiting with you next month, and we appreciate all the information you're gathering and all the work you're doing to help prepare us in our decision-making.
All right, well, thanks, and thank you again for your patience with my dropped cell phone, but I will look forward to seeing you next month, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks a lot, Bruce.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Madam Chair, Brady and I sat at the desk for a couple, 3 months talking about instituting this 1% sales tax. And do you think we can do it? Do you think it'll fly? It flew beyond all measures, and then Duluth decided to do it, and they were refused. They later got it,
Yeah.
but we got to be ahead of everything.
Absolutely. All right, well, that is good. Well, I would like to thank our MIS department for waiting so patiently, but we're here to hear from both Jay and Rowan about a couple of items, Pictometry and a resolution of authority for the IRRR Community Infrastructure Grant application. Good morning.
Good morning. So, our first item today is a cost-sharing agreement between Cook County and Arrowhead Electric for Pictometry. It is to allow Arrowhead Electric to reimburse Cook County for their share of expenses incurred up to $8,578.75, not to exceed. And this is a program that's been going on for a long time. It benefits all of our partners. In this case, with Arrowhead Electric, they typically otherwise would spend thousands of dollars sending technicians out to look at management areas, some of which may not actually need management or not. And so there's a big benefit to them, and it's data collection that we would use anyways, that we would collect anyway, and then it'll the cost allows us to continue it, but also to provide them with training and use of analysis tools. It's a continuation of a program that's been going on for a long time, and we'll stand to receive some reimbursement. So with that, I stand for any questions on the agreement.
Do any commissioners have questions for Rowan? All right, if not, I would entertain a motion. Oh, Commissioner White.
Who owns the equipment? I mean, or is that contracted out for the high-resolution aerial imagery? Is that some other?
It is,
Entity.
Eagle View.
School owns that, I think?
The pictometry machine?
No, they're
This has
building
been
them.
talked about before. No, so it's aerial photography. We pay a flight crew to fly around during leaf off, right now, actually, to collect pictures while the snow's melted and before everything
Leaf
greens
off.
up, you get the best data. And so, yep, we pay Eagle View to fly around the county and take pictures of the areas that we defined in each year, each contract year. There's a dedicated section.
Okay.
Other questions? Commissioner Hawkins.
Yeah, I have a question about the cost sharing. So this is for Arrowhead Electric.
It is, yep.
And there's two different rates, as far as what makes up the cost. One is 360 and then the other one's 175, it's for miles. And I'm just curious, I mean, we're doing the whole thing, why did they get two different rates?
I'd have to circle back with our
Okay.
GIS analyst to get you an accurate answer on there. My assumption would be that it's either areas that we might not collect otherwise that they want, and they're paying more in that
Oh,
area.
Okay.
But I'll look to validate that with our GIS analyst and follow up.
And what about the other cost-sharing agreements then with our other partners that want this done?
We do
When-
it each year, and so in a year where we would work with Grand Portage, it'll be the year where we're flying in that area.
Okay.
If we work with the Forest Service or the DNR, it'll be in a year where we're covering areas where they feel that they have a need.
Okay, so that's, with this map here, I didn't quite understand what all that was. So there was purple and there was blue, and so
Yep.
that's what you're talking about, that's,
Yep, so we match it to the quintiles and we'll move it around. And then actually, as we complete this, we'll look to negotiate another 5-year contract. And then as each of those years and sections come up, we'll work with the partners to work out any cost-sharing agreements if they would benefit from refreshed or added detailed information for that area.
thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve and execute the cost sharing.
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Hawkins. Is there support?
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Storley. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our second item today is seeking resolution authority for an IRRB Community Infrastructure Grant application, in which radio communication analyst Jay DeCou would be that, and I'll let him speak to it.
All right, good morning, Jay.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Good morning. A little bit of a background on why this is even something that we need to talk about. So in our budget conversations, Rowan and I were talking about future projects that are coming down the pipe for the MIS department. One of these is a bidirectional antenna facility outside of Tofty, which an agreement has already been reached with the Minnesota Department of Transportation to use the gravel pit outside of Tofty to boost the armor signal in that area, and also to provide an opportunity for co-location for a cellular carrier in that area to expand service opportunities in the whole Tofty Township area. So as we're crunching numbers for this, we're looking back at the Colville BDA and the numbers that came up for that. We're looking at our current capital account numbers and where these numbers are going to be in the future. And we came up with two decisions that we figured were the most financially prudent for this project. One is to bump the project back a year so that we have time to amass some more capital in that account. This will give us a little bit more playroom with some of the maintenance that we have going on with other towers as well. And also to apply for an IRRB infrastructure grant in order to offset some of the expenses of this project. The BDA project that we had in Colville ended up costing around, I want to say ballpark $300,000, which is a little bit more than we thought it was going to. So any offsetting of that with grant dollars would be a big big sigh of relief for the capital account. And in my communications with Chris Ismail from IRRB, he said that for this year, they do have money left over in that account. And so he encouraged me to apply for this calendar year, understanding that the project wouldn't be happening until either part of the beginning of the project would probably be in 2024, and then the conclusion of the project in 2025. They didn't have a problem with that. One of the pieces that they needed for this application, however, was a resolution of authority. The purpose of the document is basically for the county board to empower me to be able to ask for and receive this particular pot of money on behalf of the county for this specific project. So in writing the resolution, I used the IRRB suggested language, and also I added a little bit in there just to make sure it was extra clear that this is just this one thing. because I do not want to have the authority for asking for any other money on any other behalf of anything for the county. I would love it for this one, though. So that's the purpose of this particular resolution. It's a requirement of the grant process, and I would be more than happy to come and let you know how that turns out, if we get the money or not. So, and I would stand for questions, I guess.
All right. Any questions by commissioners? Commissioner Storley?
Thank you so much for working on this. When I'm in Tofty, it's kind of like, what happened?
Yeah,
Where'd you go? So they'll be pleased to know you're working on it, too.
Yep.
Thank you.
Other questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion to approve the resolution.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Hawkins. Is there support?
I'll support.
Thank you, Commissioner Storley. We have a motion and support. Any further questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks for your
I feel very
work.
authoritative. Thank you.
All right, moving on in our agenda. Auditor Powers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rachel is here from the Assessor's Department to answer any questions. She has the details. This is a request to approve 4 separate abatements. This is, one of them is a disaster abatement. There was a fire up on Devil Track Lake. Harlan Schwab lost his homestead, and there's an abatement of $442,000 allowable for that. There's also a clerical error that happened on a property in Caribou Lake where an additional 100 feet of lakeshore frontage was on the assessment record in 2022. That's for 2023 taxes, so they're correcting it now. And then multiple abatements requested for state-assessed property values. These are utilities that the state actually assesses themselves, and they have more leeway in the timing of these, so this happens more often than you'd want. But so the abatements came through late on these for Elite and Great River Energy, for 2 parcels for Elite and 7 for Great River Energy. $24,042 for Elite and $12,662 for Great River Energy. So we're asking for approval for those, and Rachel can answer the detailed questions.
All right.
If there are any.
I know I'm really familiar with, the financial implication given the fire at the Schwab residence, such a tragedy. And so we're making a correction on Caribou Lake for 738. And I'd just like to ask Rachel, tell us a little bit about your past experience with these implications as they come from Elite or Great River Energy and other organizations.
The information is given to us after we meet as a County Board of Appeal and Equalization.
Okay.
And then these dollar amounts were actually corrected after we certified our values. So this is the way to fix it.
All right. Well, I think it's helpful for me and very helpful for the public to know how that works. Commissioner Hawkins.
Yeah, so I'm still confused. I did try to look up, because I remember this being a discussion the last couple of years across the state. Some counties were hit really hard with these kind of abatements. How does it affect us going forward? I mean, if the state sets those values and your office has no control over what they do, how are we making sure that we don't have this kind of thing happen again next year? Is there anything we can do?
The only thing I could think of is that maybe
Sorry to put you on the spot.
I'm not positive on how to fix it. I've added reminders and to double check the state board.
Okay.
But it's not, I don't get the emails, so.
Okay. I'm
Yeah,
just
it's-
wondering
we're-
how this works. So.
Right, once the values are there, then it just goes into the pool, of course, and it has a slight effect on our overall valuation and how the levies are spread. It's when the state, the issues come, the bigger issues for us, we're not heavily, there are counties that are heavily dependent on these utility valuations, and as the state changes, it really affects them. Our effect isn't, they aren't that large a player for us. It's more the timing that when the changes come after we've set all of our values, we've already set our taxes, then we have to issue an abatement. That's a loss of money this year. But, you know, I know in some counties, Clearwater and others, it's a huge effect on their overall. It's kind of like the effect of the BWCA money for
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
And for us here, it's just it's the small loss we get when the state does these things later than you would like. We don't have that option, but they keep working these numbers and reassessing, and if they don't get the information to us in time to get them in so that our spread of the levy is accurate, then you have to have an abatement after the fact. So I don't know if there's something on the legislative front
I'm
that
thinking-
county
That's right.
boards
I'm
can
thinking
affect.
AMC,
Yeah.
we
Ask
add it to our
AMC.
list.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, even though it doesn't impact us a great deal, it's something we all as counties need to work together
We need
Right.
to make
on
sure the
and
state of
support one
Minnesota
another.
doesn't
Yeah.
do things that are detrimental to individual counties, again.
Absolutely, absolutely. Any other questions for Rachel? If not, is there a motion to approve the property tax abatements as listed?
I'll make a motion to approve the property tax abatements as listed.
Thank you, Commissioner White. Is there support?
Support.
All right, we have a motion and support. Any further discussion or questions? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you so much, Rachel. We really appreciate your time. All right, Land Services.
I'm sorry, Molly.
Good morning, Neva, and good morning, Tim. I'd say let's take a break, but we can't. We have no water, so you're off the hook this time.
It would just be a longer break.
All right, well, good morning to both of you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Commissioners. So last Wednesday, the Planning Commission held a public hearing for two separate proposals. The first is the Cook County Tower Ordinance. I did bring my colleagues from MIS along with today because this ordinance has a lot of crossover between our departments, and I felt that some of the questions that might come up might be better answered by them. Essentially, we held a public comment period. We received 0 written comments nor in-person comments. Most of the changes in here are a reflection of some updates to the tower ordinance as far as updating the districts and better defining the tower districts by parcel rather than just like a vague description of a dot on a map saying this is the tower district, so that developers in Florida or other, you know, we get requests from extra state areas. So that this tower ordinance can be picked up from someone who has no familiarity with Cook County and just read through it and understand the expectations really clearly. So the vast majority of changes are just trying to be much more clear to people and also have that policy in Appendix B more clearly outlined within the ordinance itself. So with that, it was a unanimous approval recommendation by the Planning Commission. Pretty minimal discussion. It was mostly more educational about the tower ordinance itself. So.
Any information that Jay or Rowan you would like to add?
I would say the expansion of the tower districts is twofold. There were 2 sites that were built on county property, Mitt Lake and the Colville BDA, and then as well as land exchange took place from the last time we touched this tower ordinance. So you'll see that 5 sites that had previously been listed as future sites are now there, and then the addition of the Mid Lake Armor Site and the Colville BDA are also expanded into tower districts. And just the overall goal of the tower ordinance and how we use it and why we have tower districts is just another step in mitigating impact to the view shed and driving co-location. Tower ordinance limits tower height to below 200 feet, which is the FAA lighting requirement. From there, if you need to provide service in an area, you're required to co-locate on an existing tower. If you can demonstrate that you can't co-locate on that tower for structural or other reasons, this is the next step in that, where we're not sending you to another hillside, to another view shed. We're having you create another tower where that infrastructure already exists in that tower district. That's the overall goal and plan.
Commissioner Mills.
So if you can't co-locate, you co-locate.
Exactly.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the proposed amendments to the Cook County Tower Ordinance.
Thank you, Commissioner Mills. Is there support?
I'll support.
Thank you, Commissioner White. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? Commissioner
I
Hawkins.
just want to say thank you for the way this was put in the packet of the red lines, the blue line, and then the purpose statement, because I really appreciated that. That prevented me from emailing you, and I appreciate the direct, this is why we're doing this, and I know that takes extra work and time on your part, but I really appreciate it, so thank you very much for that.
You're very welcome.
That was all Neva. She sent me a message and was like, we need to do a purpose in all the different statements. So it made it a lot better for us too, to understand why are we doing it. So it benefits everybody.
And it was very helpful to the Planning Commission last week. They really appreciated how it was written as well. All right, we have a motion and support. Any other discussion or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thanks, guys. The second set of ordinance amendments was, it's more topical in nature, so that's why it's two different ordinances. So it's the subdivision ordinance is where we kind of started, and then we made some proposals to change within the zoning ordinance, and I'll explain the purpose for that. So the subdivision ordinance, a lot of it was kind of housekeeping type stuff, but there's some changes that I've noticed since taking on this position that we could do to help people in this process be a little easier. So specifically, I'll kind of clarify. So the section 4.1E, I'm proposing to add language, and it's a little clunky, I recognize that. I couldn't really find a better way to phrase it. But the overall idea right now is that our administrative subdivision process only applies to properties if they haven't been subdivided within 2 years. And that's kind of a checks and balance control measure to make sure people aren't circumventing the platting process. If we didn't have that in there, people could be going in and kind of going through the administrative subdivision when they really should be doing a more comprehensive platting process. So that's one part of that. And Tim is here to lend a hand if he thinks I'm not going enough into detail, but otherwise I'll just keep going on. So the problem with this is that if the way that the land sales are these days is sometimes people aren't really ready. They don't know what the buyers all want to subdivide that parcel into 4 different parcels. And so somebody's like, well, I got one person that wants this, and then the remainder I might want to sell next year. And so if we have that requirement that you can only subdivide that within the last 2 years, they have to have all of those moving pieces ready to go to subdivide that parcel. This is talking about the maximum, up to 4 parcels. So I've got a specific case of that somebody wanted to buy an old gravel pit, and then they want to make residential lots on the other part of the property, and it took a really long time to move forward because of this timing requirement. So the way I'm proposing, it puts more judgment calls on myself and my position, and I kind of recognize that, trying to work with people. But the idea is that I'm phrasing the parent parcel, so that original parcel, hasn't been subdivided to the maximum of 4 parcels within the 2-year time period. So it's just to say that you can't get any more parcels any quicker than you could have with the original process. It's just recognizing that if you want to split off 1 parcel and then another parcel and then another parcel, it just can't be any more than 4 within the 2 years. The sticky part is like, what if I sell to somebody and then they want to be doing subdivisions before I do my subdivisions? That's where it's going to get messy. I don't know that many cases have really happened, and that's really going to happen. That's the worst case scenario I've thought through on that. So that's like a clunky part. I don't like clunkiness in the ordinance, but if anybody has better phrasing, I'm open to it. Otherwise, the other changes, updating some language, removing hardship. We don't use that term anymore. It's practical difficulty for our purposes. And then the recorder's office asks that the timeline for recording be extended. So after I do my approval for an administrative subdivision, that's basically somebody getting a letter that says, this looks okay, but this doesn't actually put the subdivision in place. That's up to the property owner then to take those deeds and all that following material that the recorder's office needs, and they have to record that decision. And there's a timeline of my approval and that recording needing to happen. So it used to be 6 months, which can be a little tight if the title companies have to do some following work and update some things. So the recorder's office asks that we extend that to 12 months. And then Torrens property are kind of a different beast, and sometimes they require even longer times. So we're just recommending addition that just gives my position the authority to extend that period for Torrens property specifically. And then, so that's kind of the big stuff for the actual subdivision ordinance. And then one goal I've had since being in this position is formalizing a boundary line adjustment process. I think historically they've been done mostly as administrative subdivisions, which is kind of a heavy-handed tool for that level of property adjustment. And this is usually a case where I want to sell 100 feet over to my neighbor, or I want to dissolve my property into the 2 neighboring properties. Those are kind of common boundary line adjustments. And so I reached out to some legal land use attorneys that work in our area, asked what other jurisdictions have good processes that work well for them as people that administer these commonly. And so they referred me to some other counties, and that's kind of where I adopted a lot of my language. The big picture here is that it's just trying to make sure we're not creating any nonconformities. If we're adjusting boundary lines, we want to be sure that those boundary lines aren't getting moved to places that are creating nonconforming structures or nonconforming lots by lot size or by water frontage, just the kind of regular things we're usually checking. I will have a new form proposed for this if it's approved, and a smaller fee than what the administrative subdivision fee, which will be a separate process following this if approved. The reason it's nested in the zoning ordinance general provisions is because the subdivision ordinance is really clear in its scope that it's supposed to be for when new parcels are created. And for that, there's a little bit of a judgment call. Once again, does a person think a parcel is created when you're just adjusting and reconfiguring it? I'm looking at it much more black and white, a new parcel meaning a new parcel number. And I think that's just a more straightforward way to look at it. So that's the reasoning for these provisions being within the zoning ordinance and not under the subdivision ordinance. I've had this publicly noticed several times because the Planning Commission had not really held a lot of spring and late winter meetings, and I never really got any written comments nor real interest from the public on this material. I very first originally noticed it in December, and I did get some feedback from realtors and the recorder's office. So that's where these new changes got reflected into that. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for me, Beth?
I will, Madam Chair, if I could just add in there. Pretty much, and we expect that this is the reason why we really haven't had that much public input, is because it is making it more allowable. It is taking obstacles away from the processes that we've had. And in exploring the property line adjustment and taking it out of the administrative subdivision was actually also helped by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. In the past, maybe some 15 years ago or so, they were concerned, and they had considered, staff there had considered a property line adjustment actually creating a new parcel where you needed septic system sites identified and everything like that. They've then since have regarded just a property line adjustment as not creating a new parcel. So that helps out in this process as well. So in the state, taking it more of a liberal approach to it enables us to do that as well.
I'd just like to thank you for addressing some of the language changes that were really needed. I found them clunky, if you will, and just appreciate looking at the timing and allowing more time for things to occur. Other questions or comments? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
So move, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Mills. Is there support?
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Starley. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Lot of effort into that.
Short break.
Surely, we will take a 5-minute break, and then we will be rejoining. Welcome back, everyone, to
That
our
was
Cook County
backwards.
Board of Commissioners
Well-
meeting.
We'll correct that. That was not,
We should apologize.
yes.
I am so sorry.
We have a sign that just says the board is taking a short break. So that one said, until
10:30.
no
We
earlier
won't be
until
back.
10:30.
Oh, I think the other one was up and then I was closing it.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Gotcha.
All right.
All right.
Well, welcome
Not
back.
that
It's
everyone's
now a
gonna
little
be
before, or a little after 10, and we're returning. We're on item 8 on our agenda, and Attorney Hicken.
Thank you. So I'm going to do a mini training session today on open meeting law. And I'll close it up with a little bit on our county administrator form of government. So these are trainings that I typically put on every other year, usually in the first half of the year. We're just getting started now since I've been in trial so much. There's also a resource called the County Commissioner Handbook that those are in the process of being updated too. And my goal is to get them to you before July 1st. That's probably the best I can do at this point. So we'll go over open meeting law basics, and I've updated my research. There isn't a lot of new stuff. And then we'll go on about the county administrator form of government. I have a PowerPoint. Are you able to display that? Ms. Burka? Thank you. Do you want me to try with the remote?
Yeah, we did that.
Yep, okay.
Okay, is that working?
Yep. Good.
Nice.
Okay, so we're talking about open meeting law. Everything I'm showing you comes from Minnesota Statutes, Chapter 13D, which is all about open meeting law. And then resources from MCIT and other agencies have been helpful. There's also a specific office of the state called the Data Practices Office, and they issue advisory opinions in both open meeting law and in data practices, so I find those really helpful if you're trying to figure out a specific scenario or have questions about the interpretation of a specific phrase in the statute. The presentation is designed for you, county officials, so anybody who's watching it from somewhere else, just know that you might not get exactly the same legal advice from whoever represents you, because we're in a different situation.
That sounds like a legal disclaimer.
Yep. So the purpose of the open meeting law under Minnesota statute is to prohibit secret actions, essentially. Government elected by the people should happen in front of the public and not in smoky back rooms. So that's essentially the purpose of it. To assure that the public is informed, obviously, of governmental actions and the basis that we make those actions on, and to afford the public an opportunity to present its views to the public body. So this final bullet point, well, this is the plain language of the statute. The open meeting law does not actually afford members of the public to participate in meetings. They can be there. They can take in the same information that the commissioners do. They can observe, but they are not necessarily entitled to participate in the conversation. So the public comment period that we provide is something that we do for the public, and many public entities do, and I think it's advisable. But it's actually not required under law. You'll notice that the purpose has in common the value of transparency, which has been a value of this county government, I know, since a couple of strategic planning sessions back, that we value transparency in our government, and following open meeting law is one way that we do that. So, the rule is meetings of public bodies must be open to the public. That's your one sentence rule. And we're going to break it down into what is a public body, what is a meeting, what does open mean. And knowing underlying all of this is a tendency for the courts to construe open meeting law against governments. So in other words, to liberally construe open meeting law to favor the public and the public's access to information. So whenever there is a close call, we make that call on the side of following open meeting law procedures, because we know that the courts would do the same in a close call. A public body is this body, of course. Any county board working sessions and workshops, so even if you're not intending on taking action, if you are meeting as a quorum and you're discussing county business, that is you are acting as a public body. Committees, subcommittees, departments, and commissions of the county can be considered public bodies and requiring open meeting law procedures if the county board has delegated them decision-making authority. One example of this is our airport commission. I always advise our airport commission to follow open meeting law. They don't have a quorum of commissioners there, but the county board has delegated much decision-making authority to the airport commission. They make a lot of our decisions related to our airport, so we should construe them to be a public body and require them to do open meeting law. Other entities, for your information, obviously the school board, the EDA, any joint powers entities and boards where any of the joint powers are public bodies become a public body under the law, Planning Commission, and the Zoning Board of Adjustment.
Molly, could I ask a question? What about the advisory committees that we have?
Advisory committees, typically you're not delegating decision-making authority to them. They're making recommendations to you, and then you're exercising authority. So advisory committees that don't include a quorum of commissioners are not going to be considered you don't need to follow.
Thank you.
There's some additional guidance on committees.
Can you go back one slide? Sorry, I was listening and not reading.
Yeah, I already kind of covered this, but essentially you need to have formally delegated authority to a committee.
Yep.
And the airport commission that I was talking about, they do have a set of bylaws that are signed off by the board, and so I consider that to be a delegation of authority formally made. What is a meeting? So we've talked about what is a public body. What is the meeting? So when a meeting exists, that needs to be open. But what does a meeting mean? It means a quorum of that public body. So the number of commissioners that would make a quorum, in our case 3. And then discussion of any county business. That would typically be the function of that county entity. So those are the 2 elements of a meeting. Discussion of county business, how do you define that? Discussing, deciding, or receiving information as a group on issues relating to the official business of that governing body. So if you look at this definition, even an informational gathering of commissioners would be an open meeting. There are a couple of exceptions that could apply, and I'll get to those later. There was for example, there's a Minnesota Attorney General opinion about open meeting law that says city council attendance at a League of Minnesota Cities training program for city officials did not violate the law. If those counselors didn't talk about specific municipal business of their municipality. So I think the equivalent would be going to an AMC conference. You're there with a bunch of commissioners. You're learning about general county commissioner related topics, nothing related specifically to your county. Arguably that is the same situation as that League of Minnesota Cities training program and would not need to be noticed as a meeting. Any questions about that? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Attorney Hicken. Sue, say, there's a city council meeting and, or say there's a city planning commission meeting with a commissioner on the planning commission and 2 commissioners attending the meeting to give public comment or at a hearing.
Yeah, that's going to be called a meeting.
Well,
That would need to be,
it's city business, not county business.
right, but it would be a meeting of the city. Right, oh, sorry, you're saying,
City Planning Commission.
give me your hypothetical again.
We have a county commissioner on
Okay.
the city planning commission.
Yes.
This would never actually happen.
No, not even twice. And we have 2 county commissioners attending the city planning commission meeting to give public comment at a public hearing.
Oh, my goodness.
No, but no
But there's
county
no-
business.
No county business, it's all
Personal
city.
conversation happening between us.
Correct.
The personal conversation between you doesn't matter much. However, I think it could be an argument, in our favor if we were challenged. This is an interesting hypothetical that I would tend to agree. We're talking about city business. You're there as a city participant, city resident either, or as a representative of the city on this city appointed board. Probably not county business. I would always say.
That was my rationale.
Yeah.
And we have evidence for that.
Yeah.
So I felt comfortable-ish.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's good to.
But it's noticed as a public meeting of the planning commission.
Of the planning
So-
commission.
But we need
The
to
city.
notice it as a county public meeting if it's gonna be right? We have to,
If
it can't
if
just be a
it's
public
county
meeting, it
business.
has to be a specific, the notice has to be for the meeting, right?
If you were talking about county business at that meeting, like in the scenario you've talked about, you're not talking about the county business, you're talking about city business. No, none of the 3 of you has any decision-making authority, like, for that issue, because it's a city issue and not a county issue.
Only the one of us does.
Right, but appointed as a city representative,
Right,
not as a
yeah,
county.
right.
Correct.
No added authority
Right.
as a county
Yeah,
commissioner.
yeah, yeah.
I don't think that would necessarily need to be noticed. If you said a word about county business, I would say you do need to notice that, and that it would need to be noticed as a meeting of the county board, even though it had already been noticed as a meeting of the city planning commission.
So there is no blanket public meeting notice, it's for each
Entity.
entity needs to have,
Yes.
separate notice.
Commissioner Storley, you had a question.
Yes, well, in switching to a county meeting, so in January, we all took our different positions as who we're going to represent on the board from wherever. Now what's happening is that there's an interest on my part for EDA and HRA, but I'm not their representatives. Do I register ahead of time? Do I just wait to read the minutes? Can I attend? How does that work?
Well, if you're going to attend, you have to make sure you've talked to the other commissioner who you expect to be in attendance.
Okay.
And see if there are going to be 3 there.
And if 2 of them are there, then I wouldn't be able to
And the
go.
EDA is a quasi-county,
Yeah.
like, that's a county-city entity.
True.
So you can't really extract your county role out of being there.
But HRA is.
I think HRA is also a county.
All county.
Yeah.
So just check ahead is what you're saying?
Yeah, and defer to the person who's already been appointed, you know.
2 is
who
fine,
has had
though.
a formal role.
2 is fine.
Yeah, 2 is fine. Any other questions?
Very helpful.
So, what is not a meeting? So obviously, if you have less than a quorum, if you were talking to a single other commissioner, letters are not a meeting. So, in the days where we used to send letters more, a commissioner could send a letter to other members of the board. They get it several days before the meeting, whatever. That would be allowed. That type of communication would be allowed. We ask you to step back from email, though, and don't consider email like a letter. Because email can be instantaneously delivered, and you can have what seems like more of a board conversation just by reply all, reply all, reply all. That becomes a conversation. That becomes a meeting much more easily than a U.S. Post written letter. Do you understand that distinction that I'm making? So what you have to be careful about, even if you're just talking to a single other commissioner, is the danger of serial meetings, they're called. So you have one subject area that you're really interested in, and you contact your other commissioner to see how she might be, how she might vote or what her thoughts are. If you go and contact another commissioner about that same issue, you're in a 3-way conversation about county business, which makes it a meeting. That's what we mean by serial meetings. So talk to one other commissioner about this subject, talk to another commissioner about the same subject. Now you're in a serial meeting situation. So that's the kind of thing to avoid. That's all I can say about that, yeah.
So if I really want ranked choice voting to happen, and I don't know how the rest of the board feels, and so I call Commissioner Hawkins and say, hey, blah, 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 what do you think of this? And then get feedback, and then I, again, care about ranked choice voting, and I go to Commissioner White and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking, what do you think of this? Even if I don't share Commissioner Hawkins's comments, that's still a violation of open meeting law.
Yes. Yes.
I'd like to go back to the HRA. If there are 2 commissioners at an HRA, EDA, at one of those meetings, what if I wanted to just go and sit quietly, it's a stretch, quietly as a community member and just listen to hear what's going on? Is that okay if I don't know? I can't.
I would ask that be noticed as a special meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even though those meetings are already publicly noticed.
Yeah, because they're publicly noticed as a meeting of the HRA body or the EDA body. That a quorum of that entity will be present. That notice can't be interpreted to mean a quorum of the county board will be present. We need to give notice that the quorum of the county board would be present for it to be adequate notice.
And that's 3 days?
Mhm.
3 business days, or 3, how does that work?
Yeah, 3 business days for a special meeting notice, which is always what we use.
So it couldn't be like
So I couldn't
that
go.
afternoon?
So I couldn't go in a disguise and sit there at the back of the room.
Oh, yeah,
and
that'd
just
just be illegal.
I'd be illegal doing that.
Yeah. So you gotta be careful. It's hard to extricate your role as a county commissioner from your role as a citizen. And, to the extent that we shouldn't try to. Yep.
What are the consequences? Losing public trust, certainly, but my understanding is we are personally, individually liable as well.
Yeah, I think it's a misdemeanor. Let me just, I think I closed yeah, I think it's a misdemeanor to,
I thought it was like 20 grand or something.
that would be a felony level.
Does NCIT cover that?
Nope. Good question.
Does the sheriff show up?
Yeah, I think it's a misdemeanor on that. Oh, civil fines, forfeiture of office, Yeah, personal liability for a $300 fine.
Oh,
You forfeit your office if there are 3 violations. In addition to other remedies, court may award reasonable costs, disbursements, and reasonable attorney fees of up to $13,000 to any party in an action under this chapter. So if some party feels like they are wronged, you made a decision that wronged them in violation of open meeting law, they could sue you in civil court. But, yeah. It has happened. Yeah, and it is personal liability, not just your county paying that fee. All right. This is what I was already talking about. Yep. So if it resembles a paper-based communication, like a letter writing, that's different. But if it more resembles a conversation through digital conversations, then I would say go for open meeting law rules. Okay, so remote meetings. There are 2 different mechanisms by which a commissioner can participate in a meeting remotely and still be considered part of the quorum and still vote, etc. Those scenarios are pretty narrow in their application. We did it a lot during the pandemic. That's because there's an actual pandemic exception under 13D. Oh, oops. See, I'm doing. Yeah. Okay. Under 13D02, we did these procedures. So, but you can only do these during a pandemic or an emergency. You have to have somebody like the county administrator or county attorney or other presiding officer, like the chair of the board, has made the decision that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent because of a health pandemic or an emergency. We need the technology to be available, and now it is like universally available pretty much among county boards. Zoom, for example. Technology where you can hear and see one another, you can participate in discussion, and you can see any discussion that or presentations that are being made at the meeting. Members of the public at the regular meeting location can hear and see. And we did make an exception for this as allowed under statute during the pandemic when no in-person meetings were being recommended by the Department of Health. There is an exception that you don't have to provide this space even for people to attend the regular meeting, but they advise try to make it remotely available, which is what we did. We made sure people could see it by Zoom or YouTube. And then at least one member of the entity must be present at the regular meeting location if you're going to do this, and you have to do the roll call vote. So that's your pandemic or emergency exception. There is another one, an exception. The kicker is always the number 5. Oops. Number 5 in this ordered list of conditions, which is that, so a commissioner can appear remotely at a county board meeting, but they themselves have to be sitting in a public location where ostensibly members of the public could come sit next to them and observe the hearing, or observe the meeting, poke them.
Commissioner Storley, you have a question.
I really
Yep.
have a problem with that.
Yeah.
Anyway, but we're not in the pandemic as of May 11th.
Yeah.
So this is just for an emergency guidelines.
There are 2 different exceptions. There's the pandemic exception, and this one that I'm talking about right now, a pandemic does not have to be present in order to do this.
Okay.
Now, this is what's allowed under state law, right? This body can decide different rules that are more restrictive. Like if you never want to have a commissioner appearing remotely except in the medical emergency, then do that in your bylaws. But you can make your bylaws, and I think currently your bylaws are as open as this statute. If somebody needs to be at a meeting remotely, they can do so under these under these conditions. So again, it's that technology has to be there so you can see and hear each other. The members of the public who are here in this room have to be able to see and hear you. Again, at least one member of the board needs to be present. You need to do the roll call vote, but the sticker is always, where are you going to appear from? A Starbucks? Somebody somewhere that's public? Do you want to make your living room open to the public so that people can step in there? And we would want to actually publish that location that you were from, too. That's what the notice would require.
That seems to be, you know, in most cases, if we have to be away from our meeting for whatever, medical or whatever, but when I was gone one time, I'm not going to sit in a library or a Starbucks. I will just miss the meeting.
Yeah.
If I can't have it where I am, you know.
Yeah. And there is an exception for that, number 5, in the case of active duty, you know, somebody who's in the military and is at a required training or has been deployed, or a medical emergency, like if you're having to appear from your hospital bed. And I think you then even need it documented by a healthcare professional that it's been recommended you not be in a public place. So those are the 2 exceptions. Did somebody have a question over here?
I'm curious if it's, when we're talking about being in a public place away from this place, can it be in another state? Can it, or is there limitations?
There does not seem to be any restriction against it, you appearing from out of state.
Could we be in outer space?
There is no restriction in the statute that would prevent
okay.
you from being in outer space.
Or under the
But
sea?
it has to be a public place.
Yes, it has, you know, any
That's the
member of the
ultimate, I
public
think.
should be able to
International
jump on the
Space
space
Station.
shuttle.
I can just share an example for Soil and Water Conservation District. We have a monthly meeting in Ely. In the winter, that can be problematic. And so what we do is publicly notice that the meeting will be in Ely and that it will be here in this room. And that way we have it open to the public and people can attend in both locations. So we do that in advance throughout the winter, and it works very, very well.
That's great, yep.
Yeah.
Do
So-
people ever show up in this location?
We have not had anybody this year show up.
Yeah. I mean, I think remotely streaming your meetings makes these scenarios a lot less likely that, you know, people have such good access without even showing up.
Yeah.
So, any other questions? Okay. Other things that are not a meeting, if you by chance bump into each other in the community or you're at a purely social gathering, so long as no county business is discussed, that's not a meeting. I think I've gone back and forth on this, but I think that what did we decide about the annual chamber celebration?
Yeah.
Didn't we end up noticing that?
We did notice it.
We did
Yeah.
notice that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we tried to sit separately
Yeah.
anyway, just so there was no appearance of.
Yeah, I think that's good, because I just don't know how you could argue that that's not county business.
Right.
Even though they want everybody to have a good time, and it's about your social connections, it's also about business.
Community issues.
Meetings of county employees or staff where there are not commissioners present are not meetings that must be open. And a gathering of a quorum where an employee hands out a copy of a written document to each, but does not discuss it. And the commissioners don't have a group discussion about it. That would not be a meeting. So that seems like a very specific scenario, but it's laid out exactly like that in the statutes.
So can you just, I mean, what situation does that describe? Because, I mean, there's a quorum present.
Yeah. Well, what about our county benefits thing,
Okay.
where we have our HR people and different people from county benefits
Okay.
in this room. And commissioners are invited to come along to that, like any other county employee. If they show up and there are 3 and they're all being handed the same information, not a meeting.
Mhm. Gotcha.
It's not specifically for commissioners, it's for employees in general. Yeah, I think that would be one of those situations. And finally, here's that training or educational event. I referred to this earlier in the presentation, where you're intermingled with a larger number of other attendees, and it's not specific to your county board, and no county business is discussed. That would not be a meeting. And written communications among a quorum of officials. We've talked about that already. Okay, so once it's a meeting and there's a quorum of a public body present, what do you need to do to make it open? 3 basic requirements. You've published notice in a timely manner. That includes the place and time. You've kept voting records, and any printed materials are made available for an audience. That's what open means. For regular meetings, they're always at the same time and place according to your annual meeting, and that's the way it should be. The time and place of your regular meetings is published in the auditor's office or the county administrator's office, I can't remember, and it's on a public bulletin board, and therefore you've properly noticed every regular meeting. Meetings that are outside of that regular meeting schedule are kind of by default special meetings. Special meetings require 3 days written notice be published, and you are required to publish the purpose of your special meeting in that notice. That's the only, if it's a regular meeting, you don't need to publish the purpose of it, but for a special meeting you do.
And so that notice would be on the bulletin board out here in the atrium.
Yes.
But we wouldn't be able to publish it in the News Herald, for example, because the timeline would not allow. So in that instance, we would probably do like the notice here in the building, and then probably social media, things that are immediately available to let the public know.
Yeah, and in the interest of transparency, if we do know about it early enough ahead of time, we should be publishing it in the paper too, and giving more than that 3-day minimum. And then emergency meetings are really special meetings, only in emergency circumstances. They require the immediate attention of the body, and we don't need to worry about providing notice, just getting together and making emergency decisions. I don't know of that situation happening.
Floods, fires, and pandemics.
Yeah, floods, fires, and pandemics. Yeah, and this is just further, like when you're talking about recessing a meeting or continuing a meeting at another time, you don't need to provide additional notice or publication, so long as you just say in the meeting when you're gonna start it up again.
We could go for the world record with that, huh? You could just keep it going
Keep it going the whole time.
forever. Like, we could just not adjourn and say we're gonna continue this meeting tomorrow, or whatever,
Yeah.
next Tuesday, and then just again say, that's a strange law.
Yes, but when you mix it with the, that court tendency to err on the side of public access, I think they would find that that is you have taken that action intentionally to avoid open meeting law rules, and they'd say, you are paying your $300 fine. Closed meetings, voting records, this is all pretty exciting stuff. We have to have voting records, we have to maintain them in the office. Printed materials, so we publish everything online. The statute has not caught up with the technology though, and still requires that we have at least one copy of printed materials in our county commissioner's room, available for members of the public. So, if we can kill some trees on that. That's just something that we've been a bit inconsistent with, I think, since the pandemic, but technically we should have the printed materials. Okay, so closed meetings. The basic information here is that if you're gonna close a portion of a meeting, you need a specific reason you're closing that meeting, and it needs to fit the statutory guidelines. You need to say out loud, here's gonna be the subject of our conversation, and here's why we can have the meeting closed. Put that in a resolution, and get a majority vote from the board in order to close that meeting. So, there are situations where the board has discretion in whether they may or may not close a meeting. That's what these are listed. And then there are situations in which the board is required to close its meetings. So this would often be like personnel matters for a member of the personnel who directly reports to the board. Any discussion of non-public data, investigative data, yeah, and then educational health, medical or mental health data, that all falls under non-public data, in my opinion. Okay, here's the procedure as I described. We put the specific grounds on the record, and there's a vote, and then it's closed according to the vote. And we have to record all of those meetings, even though they're closed, and retain that copy for 3 years. The only exception to this is attorney-client privileged meetings. Because lawyers wrote this law. No, just kidding. Because those are always confidential. Oh, yeah. So here's some resources. Any questions on open meeting law? Okay. Let's go to the next PowerPoint. This one is just a few slides.
Thank you, by the way.
You're welcome.
Is this PowerPoint available for us to have?
Yes, I can send it to you. I'm gonna save it as a PDF and then put the waiver language on it. That's okay.
It's all right.
So the county administrator form of government is not something we've talked about in a while. It's a government organization that's created by statute. Just like there's something called a county executive plan, there's a county manager plan, there's an auditor administrator plan. These are all plans that are in statute for how counties can run their governments. The most popular one is county administrator plan. When did we go to that? Like 2013, I think.
Oh,
10
really?
years ago. I was looking at the old documents. Yeah, that's when we hired Jay Keefe, just 2013. So it's been 10 years, but it's only been 10 years, and I feel like we're,
COVID doesn't count.
COVID doesn't count. Yes.
I felt every day of the pandemic.
Yeah,
So.
it counts for something, that's for sure.
Basically, the statute says you create this form of government by resolution of the board, and it can be created in any county that isn't already operating under one of the other plans. You appoint your county administrator, and you employ that person on the terms and conditions that you decide, although under the statute there are a couple different things. It's an indefinite appointment. It's not like a term. And after a county administrator has been there for a year, they you cannot remove that county administrator without written charges and a hearing. So it does, it's a position that's directly under the control of the county board. The county board can hire and fire, but the person does have a right to a hearing and written charges after a year. 375A06, if you're interested, is the statutory citation for the county administrator role. And there are powers and duties that are laid out for the county administrator in the statute, kind of general and then more specific. But essentially, a county administrator is the administrative head of the county. They're responsible for proper administration of the affairs of the county. They are responsible for general supervision over all county institutions and agencies. With the approval of the county board, they coordinate various activities of the county and unify the management of its affairs. That language was striking to me. Unifies the management of its affairs. So your county administrator is acting under the priorities that you've set for the county administrator, but their part of their responsibility is to make the county government act as one, essentially. And the county administrator under the statute can be appointed by the board to be a department head of any department. And then there's 7 different enumerated additional duties. What the statute says is these are not, this is not an exclusive list, and county officials can add to it by delegating additional authority. Here we go. I got it. I'll get to the right. Okay. I went through all of this. So here are the enumerated powers and duties. Hire qualified staff, provide for the execution of all ordinances, resolutions, and orders of the board. So getting signatures on stuff that the board has approved. With the approval of the county board, the county administrator can appoint, suspend, or remove county personnel who are functioning, who are completing a function of the county board. I need to do a little more research on this. I don't really understand what they're saying here. If this means every member of county personnel or just county personnel who are directly under the board's supervision, I don't know. But at any rate, the power to hire and fire, essentially. Provide for county purchases, including purchases of service. Your county administrator proposes your annual budget and your long-range capital expenditure program, attends all meetings of the county board, and recommends measures for adoption, and then can examine the books and papers of any officer or department of the county as directed by the county board, and then report findings. Our bylaws, sorry, I keep forgetting that I'm in a different one. Your bylaws also have these specific duties of the county administrator. Prepare agendas, participate in discussion, recommend resolutions and actions. County commissioners can request a verbal recommendation, etc. One addition in our bylaws is that the county administrator represents the county in relations with other governments. Makes sense. Then this is just a table I created, kind of trying to compare the 2 roles of commissioner and county administrator. I pulled most of this from the 2 statutes. What I'm trying to demonstrate here is that there's the umbrella function of deciding the policy and the general management of the county on the left side for the commissioner role. And then on the right side for county administrator role, you have, this is the person acting out the county operations in accordance with your overall plan for management. So I feel like this slide is probably the most helpful, but also requires your interpretation. And there's flexibility here, but I think it kind of is a helpful description of how these roles would act together.
I find managed county business confusing.
Yeah. It's really broad.
Because one might argue, as a commissioner, I need to manage our highway engineer then. And that's not what our role is. So I find that language very confusing.
Yeah, and what I didn't say is that these roles on the left column these come straight out of the commissioner statute, not modified by the county administrator statute. Right? So
That's pretty key.
anything that's pulled, anything on your right column here has been kind of pulled out of county board role and put into the county administrator role.
And that's an important distinction because under the old model, when we didn't have a county administrator, the county commissioners were effectively department heads, right? They directly oversaw the function of departments.
Yeah, they had different departments assigned to them.
Right.
Yeah.
In which case, that would be the commissioner's role, is to manage the county business. But because of the administrative form of government, that's the administrator's role.
Yes, your administrator has hired the qualified staff and supervises, generally supervises all of those departments. So that's kind of taken off your plate and you can focus more on the policy and, where you want the county to head in the long run, and those kind of things. I also think about this in the following way. Commissioners have potentially as short a term as 2 years on the county board. There can be a lot of replacement of institutional knowledge that way, and your county administrator has the value of having lasted longer than 2 years, and is gaining that historical knowledge to help commissioners do their job. Whereas commissioners are hired by the public, they're elected by the public, and can bring in fresh ideas and kind of like the current desires of the residents of Cook County, and kind of meld those with what the county administrator knows about our institutional operation and how we can work to change that. So I hope this was helpful. I can share this one too if you want. Is there anything you want to
I think we
add?
can append those after the fact to the board packet. So we'll make sure those are part of the record.
Yep.
I guess my only comment is that last slide again. I think it doesn't accurately portray our situation. Like, it makes that very confusing if it's just in the packet or if it's just out in the public. Well, you're a county commissioner. You're supposed to be managing the business, or you're supposed to be managing the funds. Like, we give the overall vision, and we do have the final say and approval, but that isn't our tactile function. So some I don't know, further thought or discussion on that side, I think, would be worthwhile.
So if I change the headings on those columns to, on the left side, commissioner role, no administrator.
Yes, there you go.
And then on the
Boom.
right
Yep.
side, delegated to county administrator.
Yep.
Would that help that?
Or if it was the two different forms of government, right? I don't know what it's called when there is no administrator.
Yeah,
just-
there's.
Chaos.
There we go. That's what it is. That's general chaos.
Yeah.
Commissioner Hawkins.
I'm just going to respond to Commissioner Mills because I have a different interpretation again than you. So when I saw that a county, that we manage things, I wasn't thinking managing like every little detail, but I think in a way, our committee assignments are where we are having input and managing. You happen to focus more on the public health and human services side. I may be in the highway department, and Commissioner Sullivan is at the airport. We are having input and trying to guide and manage our little areas through our committee. So I do see that as one of our duties. And of course, our administrator needs to be on top of all of us to know what we're doing. But we do manage county business, and at the committee level at least.
So I interpret that differently, because not surprisingly, right? No, I think when I hear the word management, I think about oversight of like day-to-day operations versus like working at a policy level. And you're right, Commissioner, that each of you sits on various committees, and you do, I mean, you are there because you should have that knowledge. You should be aware of what's happening. And I think the reason that's important is because you have a responsibility as an elected official to set policy in these different areas. And that is really I think the distinction is, the commissioners are working at kind of a policy level and providing the overall direction of the organization, where the administration is kind of overseeing the implementation of the policy and really overseeing day-to-day operations, the minutia of how things happen.
Commissioner White.
Well, I think one part that's not ever mentioned here is commissioners, as the administrator said, we are elected, and so we are the bridge between, the community that we represent, that we bring forward information from the community and give information out to help direct the management, for us to make policy, and to help the administrator to direct him how to manage decisions. I sort of agree that we don't actually manage as a commissioner. I think
We certainly guide.
we guide.
I would say guide is a really good verb to use there.
Yeah.
And on top of all that, we as commissioners have no power. We as a board have power.
Right. Right.
Great, well, thanks for.
Thank
you
you.
for
This
the
has been a very
reminders.
valuable
Yeah.
discussion. Thank you. We appreciate all your work. Administrator, you're up.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to go back to the conversation that we had last week in the Committee of the Whole. First of all, thank you, Commissioners, for your active participation in that discussion regarding the capital improvement plan. I heard in that meeting that a couple of things that I think are really important. So I had been planning to bring forward the draft CIP for the board's approval on June 27th. And what I heard at last week's session is that you're not all certain that you'll be ready to take some action on that. And I appreciate that, because it's a big step. And I want to make sure that the five of you have the information that you need to feel comfortable making a decision. And it sounds like we're not there yet. So I want to acknowledge that. I also heard that there would be an interest in having some special meetings in the coming weeks to receive more information, possibly to do some tours if needed. I did want to mention, we've spoken with court administration. Judge Kuzo was offering to give us a tour of the upstairs space and talk about some of their operational needs, which I think is a great opportunity. It appears that he will be available June 20th. for a tour. And so that is one of our regular that's actually the committee of the whole date for June. So I'm proposing that at that committee of the whole, we take time to go upstairs and look around at the space and talk with Judge Kuzo and possibly Mark Coyne and some of the staff up there about their experience working in that space and what some of the challenges are. I've heard the jury deliberation room is woefully small.
Cozy.
Cozy is a word. And so just to get their perspective on that, obviously, since one key element of what we're proposing is to potentially create a justice center, it would be important to hear kind of how the existing space is working for them or not working in certain regards, and get that perspective. Any planning that we do involving court space necessarily has to involve those folks. So that will be an opportunity for us to talk with them and get that information from them. In regard to other information that you all need, I am thinking about when and how we can schedule additional meetings and what information you would want to have. You heard from Bruce Kimmel this morning. We are working on the update of the financial management plan. I think that's going to be a big part, obviously, of the discussion in terms of what, we know we've got 13.4 million in deferred maintenance. Do we do all of that on the schedule that CRBPS has recommended? Do we pick and choose? Still conversations that we need to have there. And then also the addition of any new space is another conversation. So we'd just like some additional feedback this morning, if I could, in terms of how you all would like to proceed.
Commissioner
I really want us to have more opportunities, open meeting laws, but for all of us to discuss. And because as we discuss, different things different perspectives come up, and I think we can better come to a decision when we consider all sorts of perspectives. So, and we never, as commissioners, it's like if you open meeting, like you never have a chance to really talk about the issues and so let's have some meetings that are dedicated to talking about this issue ad nauseum if need be, but to really get all of the answers and all of the questions answered.
And to that end, it would be useful to know what the questions are in advance so that we can actually collect information that's responsive to your concerns.
I know one thing constituents have indicated is just any information that they can have. I know we have some information on our website, but I think the more information that we can get out to the public, the more feedback we have, and that's going to result in us kind of sharpening or honing our questions for you. Commissioner Hawkins.
I have a specific question. As far as the financial management plan, I would like to see various plans. Where we are at 2023, this is our levy, this is our debt load, and projecting out nothing changing drastically, but cost of living increases for the next year and the next year out. Then a separate one that says, here's our deferred maintenance over, I don't care, you want to choose 5 or 6 years. And if we broke that up and how that affects the levy compared to doing nothing, which I don't think is an option, but that we need to compare it to that. And then I'd like to see a third plan that says, here's the deferred maintenance plan plus an additional, here's our justice center factored in. This is what it's going to cost. I need to see all 3 possibilities, not just one, in order for me to feel confident of choosing what I think is best for our community.
Commissioner Storley?
Thank you, yes. I believe we, excuse me, we need to have good comparisons, especially when it comes to the amount of money it will take to do whatever you want to call it, Justice Center, addition to the building for social folks too, and combine all that with what, because it was laid out very nicely. I mean, it said Highway Department, electrical this year, doors 2027. So we have an idea about what's imminent and then what can wait. And so all of that needs to be laid out in terms of this, as you say, 3 different scenarios. Please.
Yes, I like that.
Commissioner Mills, you're quiet.
I don't need any further information. This has been going on since before I was elected, and I've been following it ever since. And I've talked with staff, I've toured all departments, I've toured all buildings and see the deficiencies, I've seen what's been put off, I've seen the consequences of valued engineering, and and I've seen other counties deal with capital needs, and we're way behind. So I'm feeling impatient, but feel strongly that we all need to understand the situation in its entirety.
So have you made a decision on A, B, or C with the plans then? Have you come to a conclusion of which one's the best?
I'm waiting on the financial management plan side of things, because I think there's a lot of opportunity for funding, especially with that 1%. And so that's why I was asking Bruce about that. That's an option that we've discussed a little bit and seemed like it was really promising. And granted, we have to factor that in with our wage increase and future wage increases. And so that's where it's like, okay, what does this practically mean? Just kind of like what you're requesting there. But I don't think I need anything further.
I should mention, I mean, in our conversations with Bruce, we were talking about having a draft of the FMP available first part of June. I don't know, in what you're describing, Commissioner Hawkins, and also there are some other things that have happened in terms of the legislative session just concluded, where we're going to see an increase in county program aid and in our state payments in lieu of taxes. So there are some new revenue streams. There are also some new expenses potentially related to legislation. And then the unresolved issue of the federal payments in lieu of taxes. So a lot of moving parts, but our goal is to bring forward an estimate of what things would look like in the next 5 years, so that you guys can have a more informed decision about how to proceed.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. And I get, we don't know all the answers yet, but if we can see a projection, well, if this happens, this is our projection of what may happen. And if it doesn't happen, this is what we expect. And I kind of need to know that information to decide. I agree with Commissioner Mills, we have to do something. I'm just not sold on, should it be a justice center? Should it be something else? I don't know, and I don't know that I will be able to tell you that until I know the numbers.
And to knowing numbers, I mean, I think I saw it once, a printout of the breakdown. There were the different buildings and the estimated costs, but then what made up those estimates for every building, not just the ones that are the biggest priority at this point in time, like the community center and law enforcement and the courthouse, but for all of them, because that information is good for the entire public to digest. And we need it in paper form, and it's appreciated, at least on the East End, I know, because, and it keeps the voters involved, because they've got it right here, and they go to the coffee thing at the church or wherever they're going, and they've got their packets of information. I don't know what else they talk about, but it's a men's group. So all that information, it's just information, and I'd like to know the square footage of usable space down in the basement. Here's a specific, downstairs. Not the boiler room, not the one, and the room that leaks.
Define usable.
Yeah.
Usable meaning that if it were usable for storage is what I'm talking about. The old office spaces, and yeah, I know they're filled up now, but what's the square footage in there? And as we discussed, I did that in my closet just the other day, looking for something, and it's like, this doesn't all need to be here anymore. You know, but then I ran out of energy. I was not up to the task of purging at that moment in time, so I shut the door and thought, yeah. But anyway, that's how much space is needed for things that do need to be stored. I mean, we do need to keep a lot of things, I get that, there's not a problem with that. Though how much space, I mean, do we have like 1,000 document boxes that have to be saved, but we have 2,000 we can get rid of, or, and it's gonna take a mind-numbing amount of time for somebody to have to sort through that and make those decisions. But that's what I want to know, because I'm still thinking that there should, rather than be a storage space like it is at this moment in time, it should be more efficiently used than it is.
I think one thing we could do is when we do the
Well, tour.
tour of the courthouse space upstairs, is also do a visit in the basement
bring it
and look
to
at
you.
that space again. That suggestion was brought up in the Budget and Facilities Advisory Committee meeting, and the person who made the suggestion, I offered to take him down there and look at that space. And after we did that, he was like, okay, this, never mind what I said. Our storage needs, there's a lot of stuff down there that has to stay in the building. There are a lot of records that we are obligated by statute to keep for a certain period, and that are accessed on an ongoing basis. So there may be some opportunities to clean out the closet, as it were. I'm pretty confident it would not
But then if
open up
that's
the
still
amount
the
of space
case,
that we would need.
we need to have a space down there that is climate controlled, so it doesn't smell like mildew because of the leak of the water coming down into the basement. The old lunchroom or social service room. I mean, there's water that comes in there. It smells
Occasionally, yes.
like mold, and that's, now we have a mold issue. So, something needs to be done. If those documents just stay there and we don't even sort through them, something needs to be done so the air quality and, because, to stop the water intrusion. It's not good for any building to have water coming all the way through it. So, and I don't know if that's even on the capital improvement plan. I don't know, is it?
I don't know.
You don't
if it
need to
is.
know I mean, that's just, it's like.
I think at this point, we're at concepts and not
Sure,
details.
okay. But that was a question.
Any other items?
Well, I did mention that,
Madam Chair, before we move on, is that helpful? Does that clarify things?
It is
I am
helpful.
concerned about future discussions. I mean, I see two things written down, and I think there's gonna be more things coming up from future discussions. And so I'm, I guess, prodding the board for that.
what I would ask is if you think about this after today's meeting and you have additional questions that you would like us to address, it would be really handy to know what those questions are so that we can dig up the information that you need. Recognizing that, of course, the financial management plan is kind of like the single biggest piece of information to bring more clarity and definition to this discussion.
And I think having Judge Kuzo come,
That's going to be very
that's
helpful.
huge.
Okay, I just thought
Commissioner
of one more
Hawkins.
thing. And this isn't going to be totally popular, but I'll bring it up anyway. The number of buildings, and are there buildings that do not need to be on our building list? And what are our options for not having some buildings on that list?
That's a big question. Obviously, not all 25 buildings have the same level of priority
Correct.
in terms of our essential services. And so I think we do need to at least have a discussion about, what does it look like currently? What could it look like in the future? And if the board is wanting to explore options for decreasing the size of our building portfolio, how do we do that in a way that is responsive to community needs? Because like you said, there are some folks who are going to say, who are going to be very insistent that, yes, all of these buildings are important, we need to keep them. They all serve some kind of community purpose, and that shouldn't be discounted. But in terms of balancing our building and building needs with our resources, I think there's a conversation we need to have.
Anything else?
What do we have? Or anything else on the CIP?
CIP, that's what I was
Yeah.
asking. All right.
Okay, well, questions are welcome, so let me know. The other big thing, you all got the email this morning from the Association of Minnesota Counties. The legislative session is over. A lot of changes. And I just want to note, we actually got an email, I believe last night, from Senator Hoschild speaking to some of the big news in regard to new revenues. And let me just pull that up real quick. Oh, I printed it. Very good. So as I mentioned, county program aid has been increased. And the other thing to mention is that I believe I saw in the AMC email that these changes won't take effect until fiscal year '25. So not immediate changes in revenue, but county program aid is going up by about $158,000. And then we are expecting to receive, in addition to the roughly $330,000 we currently get in state payments in lieu of taxes, that amount is going up by about $210,000. So all told, between those two, an additional $370-some thousand, which is really good news. So, and there's still a lot of details, obviously, that we need to dig into. And again, these aren't immediate changes in revenue, but still good news for certainly planning for capital needs. The other issue that Bruce Kimmel mentioned a short while ago is the 1% sales tax. Once those bonds are paid off, he understands, and again, we need to do some more research on this, but he understands that we couldn't capture excess revenues from that to use for other purposes. If that is true, we need to be thinking about possibly going back to the legislature for basically an extension of that sales tax, if that's the board's desire. Because that could be a really important means of financing capital improvements. So need to be thinking ahead on that, and that'll be part of our conversation the next time Bruce comes back to us. So those are kind of the biggies. Yeah.
All right. Commissioner Mills.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Administrator Yorkie. And along those lines, I think it would be helpful to maybe have discussion around the impacts, the dollars that our community are leveraging that are brought in from visitors, and as we're talking about these significant capital improvement projects, how those dollars may or may not be used to offset, our community's costs. I think that's a really powerful tool that we can't lean on enough, just based on the historical numbers that we've got from this last round of 1%. I don't know if there's an analysis that Ellers can do on that, or if that's even necessary or appropriate, but that could really help guide us, our finances moving forward. But we're talking, was it $20 million for the whole 1%? Was that the original?
That was the bond projects we were allowed to.
Roughly 75% is paid from visitors. Maybe it's 50, 75, whatever it is. That's a lot of money. That's not our community having to foot that. So if we can, that's the scope and scale I'd like us as a board to be looking at.
All right, we will move on to commissioner updates. Just to add on to what Administrator Yorkie shared, in addition to the funding he mentioned and our email from Senator Hoschild, also we have money from the Gitchigami Trail that has been allocated, and the Cook County Historical Society was allocated funding. So really good news, and again, a lot of detail that we'll be getting in the next week or so. Just from my perspective, we had an airport advisory committee meeting last week, and we had members of the commission go to the Minnesota Council of Airports, and they got some information on leases for the airport. So Attorney Hicken will be getting some updated information and some documents that will be revised by the commission for you to look through related to hangar leases. But there were a couple of additions that their legal counsel was suggesting related to clauses related to construction of new hangars and things of that nature. So be expecting that. And then Gunflint Trail Scenic Byway met last week, getting ready for the Gunflint cleanup. That's going to be June 2nd through 4th, so a week later. There are going to be more seasonal residents that will be able to participate in that, but it's also graduation weekend, which makes it a little challenging for some people to assist. So if anyone here sitting on our county board would like to assist with that, there's a sign-up that's online, and we can pick up anytime from June 2nd to the 4th, and our highway department, as they always do, pick up the bags after they're filled and left along the trail. Gunflint Trail Scenic Byway also is planning a celebration towards the end of June. We don't have the date yet, but finally the Swamper sign is being completed. That's been worked on for the last couple of years. It's been a great collaboration between the Forest Service, the Cook County Historical Society, Gunflint Trail Scenic Byway, GTA, and really excited about it. So when that date is finalized, I will be forwarding information to all of you, and hope you can attend. Commissioner Mills, updates from you.
Nothing to add, Madam Chair.
All right, Commissioner White.
Well, all I had was from the Northern Counties Land Use Coordinating Board. It was just a breakdown. It was a PILT that from the state we get $1 per acre base increase for the county and state lands. And then I don't know, do we have, they talk about bonus payments, and that's for shoreline wetlands essentially in these other counties, and I don't know, there's one here. Do we have a lot of shoreline, shoreline state-owned property besides the state parks? And anyway, there's a bonus payment coming from that too, and so I'm requesting from them. They did it's out there, a study report assessing the amount and value of all the lakeshore held, and so I'm going to be asking for that. I got this yesterday, so, and I just, and that the report that we got from Senator Hochschild tells us what that means. So that was pretty exciting. They were a pretty a lot of enthusiasm on the conversations they were having among themselves yesterday after this information came up. But that's about it.
Commissioner Hawkins.
Well, I attended the Arrowhead Regional Corrections meeting on Friday, and we lost our probation officer. Well, Fortunately, that person is still in our community and working in another needed field, but we are lacking a probation officer upstairs.
Oh.
And just to let you know, there have been applicants that do not have housing. And so nobody has been able so far to accept the job. And so I asked Phil Greer, what are our options? And it looks like maybe our probation officer will be based out of Two Harbors instead of Grand Marais. I don't think, that just hurts to think that our community, we cannot have a probation officer living here in our community. So I just want to say again, housing is a crisis. We keep talking about housing is our #1 priority. I guess as we go into our budget season now, our HRA has gotten $125,000 the last couple of years, and we are making progress. And I am going to challenge this board for any new proposals, new spending that gets proposed by departments or organizations, that we think about the relationship to housing and what we're spending on housing. And let's make sure that if we say something is a priority, it really shows it in our actions. So that's what I'm going to say first. Because right now, we have less than 1% of our levy dollars, or it's about 1% of our levy dollars, going to housing, besides our ARP funds, which are one-time things. So we need to seriously consider how we're going to move forward in promoting housing in Cook County.
Commissioner Storley?
Nothing to date.
All right. Well, we have a few meetings that are listed. We have Parks and Trails this evening, Northeast Minnesota Office of Job Training, 10 o'clock tomorrow. And then we have Association of Minnesota Counties District 1 meeting that many of us will be attending, June 1st. And June 8th, our community leadership meeting, which is via Zoom, and our community health assessment meeting, 9 a.m. on Wednesday, June 14th. We have a couple of correspondence memos related to the budget for the Arrowhead Library System, budget summary. And with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Mills. Is there support?
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.
Mm-hmm.